industrial leaders, and special guests. Welcome to this year's The Industrial Transformation event. Please join me in welcoming to the stage LNS Research co-founder and commercial leader, Mehul Shah.
Good morning. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm humbled, I'm honored to welcome all of you, everybody who's watching us virtually, everybody who's here in Boston, to the 6th LNS Research Industrial Transformation Executive event. We have an exciting agenda planned for you, to inspire you, to challenge you. We are all ending 2024, and we are all starting to plan for our 2025. Our goal is hopefully this day and a half will have an impact on your 2025 plans as you build your Operations 2030. Look at the number of companies that are here. I'm so proud of our team. All of these companies come from many different walks of the life. They're discrete, they're process, they're batch. Some of them have all of the production processes in their organization. We are going to hear from 55 speakers, the most we've had at any LNS research event. We'll hear about their journeys, their successes, and the goal is hopefully that has an impact on how you think about the two terms that you're going to hear a lot in the next day and a half: productivity, growth. You're going to hear this term a lot about productivity and how we as an organization, as an industry, drive productivity. Now, I've heard this from many of my discussions. All of our bosses want us to go faster. We want to drive change faster. We want to drive value faster. We want to get to revenue faster. The only way to do that is if we are able to educate and empower at different stages of our organization. Right from the C-level leadership, the CEO, the product supply leader, the organization that's driving the culture of our operations, to our functional leaders, your quality leader, EHS leaders, safety leaders, technology leaders, to the most important people, the frontline workforce. We as LNS Research exist to empower leaders to drive this change and transformation. The way we do it is really simple. We call it a guided discovery process. And there are 3 pillars to it. There are 3 pillars to drive change among our members, our industry. 1, access to groundbreaking research in the area of transformation and productivity growth. 2, access to a group of analysts that have walked in your shoes. They understand the challenges that really enable them to drive productivity. And 3, a platform, a benchmarking platform like this. Over the years, we get many questions. We have to make many decisions. A peer-to-peer network, events like this that helps you get answers not just from the LNS research team, but also from your peers in the industry. Now, I want to recognize 3 companies, 3 of our members, that have done a phenomenal job educating leaders at different levels of their organization. The first one is International Paper. So they came to the event a few years back, and since then, they have leveraged this platform to get many answers to many questions as part of their Mill of the Future initiative. We had one of our events at their Memphis, Tennessee facility, that's their headquarters, which was hosted by their SVP of Global Operations, Allison, and they had their entire leadership team, their entire technology team, business leaders, and operations leaders. Education and empowerment at different stages of the organization. Owens Corning, a global building products company. They have gone through a lot of change. They are transforming their organization. Over the past several years, they have been getting insights around how do you build your data strategy? How do you drive engagement within your organization? How do you drive workforce empowerment? And similar to IP, they had their VP of Installation, VP of Global Manufacturing and Supply Chain, present at several of our LNS research events. And they came to LNS research offices to share their 2025 plan for their operations and supply chain. Education and empowerment at different stages of the organization. And finally, IVL, a global chemical company that's transforming themselves. They're going through the biggest transformation in the history of IVL. The goal is to be more data-driven, more digital. similar to IP and OC, they are driving a lot of decisions through this platform. We've spoken at a variety of their internal meetings to educate their organization around this topic. And similar to both of these organizations, their VP of Global Operations, their head of strategy, Mr. Sanjay, he has been to a Tennessee event. He's kind of presented and learned about how do you drive change in the organization. There are many other examples. I would recommend you speak to some of these members so that you understand how can you drive change at a much faster rate. Now, this event is really special for us because of two things. We are launching some of our best research that we have done over the last 15 years that LNS has existed. So you have this particular report on your desk. Our team has been working for the past 18 months, and we will be launching two major research initiatives right here at this event. The first initiative is Industrial Productivity Index. It's the industry's first index that drives productivity and shows how productivity as an industry has moved over the last several years. The data is really interesting, but it's also a little bleak. If you look at productivity and how we are driving productivity, as an industry, our productivity is declining starting 2022. Over the next day and a half, we'll talk about how did we calculate this data? What does this data mean for your organization? And most importantly, what can you do to reverse the trend of productivity? And you don't need this data. I would say if you look at the data within your own organizations, your productivity data, your safety data, your quality data, you'll see this trend works out for majority of us. As an industry, we need to work together to make sure that we are going back up and driving profitable growth by impacting productivity within our organization. Now, I'm not just going to show you productivity data. If I'm you, I'm going to ask these questions. Are there companies that are bucking this trend? Are there companies that are driving increasing productivity? The second research that I'm excited to launch is who are the top 30 companies that are driving productivity improvements. You'll get all of this data in this report. We've looked at 330 companies that are publicly available data and looked at 10 industries, 3 companies in each of these industries that are driving significant productivity improvements. A lot of these companies are growing from a revenue perspective, but growth is one aspect and profitable growth is another aspect. As operations leader, productivity is the only thing that can add tangible value for our customers, for our stakeholders, and for our shareholders. We are really excited to have this event in the New England area. For some of you, I'm hoping you had an amazing time. We had 3 plant tours at this event. Lind Chocolates, we had Smith & Nephew, and we had Thermo Fisher Scientific. We have executives from all of these 3 companies right here at the event. Can we please give them a huge round of applause? Thank you for opening up your plants to us. This is the true meaning of benchmarking. Over the day and a half, as we have different roundtables, I would push all of you to share your journey, your challenges, so that this discussion becomes much more richer. Now, this is a busy slide, but this is a bird's eye view of the 2 executive roundtables that we're going to have today. We have carefully selected topics that we consistently hear in our surveys, in our discussion with our members, and we have looked at 2 to 3 of the best organizations that we believe are doing a phenomenal job in addressing this challenge. Now, everybody feels that events are special. I can tell you why our event is different, and there are 2 key reasons. One is the quality of content, and second is the format of the event. There are a lot of event companies that does event, and their job is to actually do events. Our job is to do research that drives productivity growth. So you'll see some of the content that our research team produces, and they'll present it at the roundtables that actually applies to your business. I think the format is about, I heard it from one of the executives, the best discussions are the discussions that happen between the PowerPoint slides. The executive roundtable format, is actually enabling you to do it. Yes, we'll have a lot of slides, don't get me wrong, but I think the idea about having around 15 to 20 executives in a room where you can actually have a discussion rather than just listen to presentation. We'll come back again at 1:30, same kind of agenda. We'll have 5 key topics with many different speakers sharing their journey, sharing their stories on how they're driving success. And then finally, a topic that's near and dear to all of us, organizational debt. The whole idea of how do we drive change in our organization. We have an amazing keynote panel lineup that will challenge you and inspire you to talk about and think about change management in a different way. Can we give all of our speakers a huge round of applause, please? Finally, this event would not be possible without the support of all of these key sponsors. They are doing some amazing work impacting productivity growth for their clients. We have their CEOs, their strategy leaders, their product leaders here. And if you look at this event, we do not have booths. We have these executives here so that you can get direct access to these executives, and you can learn from them the art of possible. How are they working with their clients to drive productivity growth? Thank you to all of the sponsors, and I would, one final time, please give them a round of applause. I am super, super excited to introduce our keynote speakers for today. You'll hear from Andy, he's SVP of America Supply for AstraZeneca, a patient-led, science-led global biopharmaceutical company. He has an illustrious career of driving tangible business results by empowering workforce through inclusion and engagement. We'll also hear from 2 of the best at AVEVA, a global industrial software company. We have Sue, who's the Chief Commercial Officer, really responsible for driving success for their clients. And Keith, I've known Keith for some time. He has intricate understanding of the challenges in this industry and the key capabilities across people, process, and technology that drives value. And with that, I would like to introduce our first keynote speaker. He and his teams are the brains behind LNS Research. Please join me in welcoming Matthew Littlefield, LNS Research.
Thank you for bringing the energy, Mehul. It is an absolute pleasure to be here today with you for our 6th annual Industrial Transformation event. We are a 100% digital company, but more than half of the team lives here in Boston and the surrounding towns, and it's our pleasure to host you to our hometown. The theme of this year's event is Pathfinders, leadership, strategy, and culture at the world's most productive companies. And it's a really important theme and new piece of research for us. So as Mehul started to describe, we benchmarked 339 publicly traded companies. We looked at all of their inputs across COGS, energy, materials, labor, distribution. We looked at all of their products across everything that they manufacture, all the services they deliver. We measured CPI and PPI across all of those different categories, hundreds of categories. We teased out those price changes and identified the true productivity changes and which are the companies that are actually driving productivity growth, not just for the short term, but for the long term, looked over a 6-year time period. And so today's event, today's presentation is going to be about what companies did that, but then how did they do that, and how do others get on that journey to becoming the world's most productive company. As Mehul mentioned, we are a mission and vision-driven company, just like our members are. It is our goal to partner with you and empower leaders like yourselves to transform their organizations. And our vision is one where industrial companies are autonomous, agile, and sustainable. And if we can just tilt the scales a little bit in that direction, we'll feel like we've made a major impact. So CEOs face a dynamic operating environment. That might be the understatement of the year. There are significant lingering inflationary pressures. CPI and PPI have stabilized, but anybody who is negotiating a labor contract right now, any chocolate company trying to buy cocoa right now will tell you there is still inflationary pressures that we face. There is also uncertain industrial policies that we're facing. In case anybody didn't notice, there is an election in about a week and a half. Maybe you didn't get the 100 text messages that I got. The good news is manufacturing is on the agenda of both major political parties. The challenge for manufacturers is that each party has a very different solution for how to drive industrial growth. So we don't know. Free trade or not, subsidies or not, tax cuts or not. Those are open questions that will be answered in the next 2 weeks. There's also shifting monetary policy. We went from transient to data dependent to we don't know what's coming next. We went from an accommodative environment to a neutral to potentially restrictive environment. How long will that last? We don't know, but we do know that has a dramatic impact on the interest rate sensitive equipment industries that are part of manufacturing. We're also being pressured by our boards, by our activist investors that are targeting our industry, that are saying, hey, we're going to see a comeback in manufacturing. We want to drive short-term profitable gains now to cash in the short term, which really can damage long-term prospects. And so we have to be prepared to fight against that. And there's also an aggressive regulatory posture right now. The EPA, the Bureau of Labor Relations, the Federal Trade Commissions, all are taking an aggressive stance against corporations today. And so we have to be prepared for that. So those are all external forces, and we can't control those, but we can study them, we can understand them, and we can prepare for them, and we can control what's inside our operation, our company. And so what does that look like? What does that look like over the past few years? LNS describes this as the degrading base case. And so coming out of the COVID pandemic and all the disruptions that happened there, we started to see some challenges emerge. And the first place it emerged was safety. And so if you think about safety metrics in the US, those had been on a long-term decline, which is a good thing in safety, for a generation, bottoming at 2020. 2021 was the first year that we saw an uptick in serious incidents and fatalities in almost a generation. And it's ticked up every year since then. Next came quality. So quality, similarly, has been on a long-term improvement over a generation. The quality of our products, the quality of the experiences that we deliver our customers has been improving greatly over a generation. 2020 hit, still going okay. 2021, getting better. 2022, we started to see the uptick. This is product recalls across all government tracked data. So it could be consumer products, life sciences, automotive, high tech, all of those industries. Product recalls were up in 2022, and they were up in 2023. Third came productivity. So this is the Industrial Productivity Index, which Mehul referenced. We bottomed there in 2020. We've been flat from about 2016, 2017 to 2020. 2021, productivity improved greatly. 22, productivity improved greatly. That was the first time that's happened in a long time. 2023, we gave back almost half the gains that we had from 2021 and 2022. So the question really is, facing the industry, was 2020 and everything that came out of the pandemic and all of that productivity improvements we gained, was that a blip on a longer-term decline of productivity? Or was 2023 the blip, and we're going to turn that back around and we're going to keep gaining productivity using AI, using new leadership practices, driving industrial strategies that can drive change? So unfortunately, all of those articles, LinkedIn posts talking about these topics are not just anecdotal. It does play out in the data. But what's the root cause? There are many root causes, but the one that we think probably contributes the most is the changing workforce in the industrial space. So when we look at a typical manufacturing organization pre-pandemic, we talked about the graying workforce, we talked about the coming retirement, but it was not yet reality. Or maybe some of the seeds were starting in some of the industries. But we still had experienced talent. We still had significant time and position. People still valued industrial jobs. The retention rate of new employees was high. People wanted to work in our factories. Fast forward 4 and 5 years, all 3 of those are down precipitously across manufacturing. So we have to ask ourselves, if we do the same things that we did in 2019 in terms of how we build a strategy, how we drive technology across the business, the processes we use, the leadership capabilities we have, if we do the same things we did in 2014 or 2019 with a dramatically different workforce in 2023, are we going to get the same level of productivity? Are we going to get that continuous improvement gain of 1% a year every year like we'd expected? Or are we going to start seeing this degradation of performance that we have seen? And we think that's the reality. And so we think many manufacturers are going to have to transform, are going to have to invest just to stay even in terms of performance because of this new workforce. Many people in this room have heard this story, understand this, and are making those investments. Not everyone gets it, though. Most operations leaders and COOs get it. Most CIOs and digital leaders get it. Do CFOs get it? Are they ready to spend a lot more just to get the same level of performance they got before? I don't think they are. And so we have a lot of education to do in that arena. And so I think anytime you have to drive change, and we'll talk about servant leadership, you have to start with yourself. And so if we were in a one-to-one session, you were a new member at LNS, and we had surveyed your company and done some benchmarking work, and we'd asked the question, right, are you viewed as a strategic and visionary leader within your company? What do you think the answer would be to that question? Love it. And so a quick hint here. So what did most companies do in response to that degrading base case and decreasing productivity in 2023? They did spin-offs, they did divestitures, they did cost-cutting initiatives, reductions in force, and those are sometimes necessary, and there was largesse coming out of 2020 to 2022, but that does not count as strategic or visionary. It is not going to motivate the troops. And so the question really is, right, were those cuts, were those changes reinvested? Did we go from underperforming products and regions and reinvest into overperforming products and regions? And so the answer to the question is probably not. Most COOs today, I believe, are strategic thinkers and are strategic, but they are not viewed strategically within their organization, often inside and out. But you're not alone. This is an industry-wide problem. In our most recent research on industrial operations strategy led by Niels, who's doing a keynote tomorrow, we found 74% of companies don't see their COOs as a strategic leader. So, are all companies struggling? Are all COOs struggling with driving change across their organization? Clearly, we can't say that they're all struggling, right? We're here to tell you that there is a path forward, and that is productivity pathfinders. So, we define pathfinders in a couple different ways. So productivity pathfinders are the top 3 companies by industry that have the highest level of productivity growth over the past 3 years, and the 3 years prior were above average. So we really wanted to identify those companies that had already been at a high level of productivity and then accelerated. And so those are productivity pathfinders. We also looked at what we call most improved pathfinders. So having done this analysis now for a couple of years, no company's productivity goes straight up and to the right. There are disruptions, markets change, product launches fail. Nobody is perfect in the area of productivity. And in fact, most are challenged with productivity. So we also worked to identify who are the most improved companies. Who are the companies that 3 years prior maybe had struggled, had lost their game a little bit, and had recovered the most over the past 3 years. So this is a 6-year study, and we've identified these 60 companies as the biggest leaders. And so what does that look like in terms of actual productivity growth? And it actually is just a coincidence that all others went from 1 to 1. So this is indexed off 2017. But when we look at median productivity growth across all those 3 categories, all the growth was among these 60 companies based on those 339. And dramatic. We're talking 20, almost 40% more growth. And so how does productivity growth translate into financial performance? And this was, and Mehul mentioned it, I think the most interesting result from this study. So productivity growth does not necessarily impact demand. It does not necessarily impact your revenue growth. It does in some scenarios, but on the average across companies, it doesn't. So both productivity Pathfinders and other companies grew at the same amount over the last 6 years, 33%. The significant difference was their operating margins. The Pathfinders grew margin in pace with their revenue growth, so both grew together. Other companies actually lost margin over the last 6 years, and that translates into dramatic losses in free cash flow, which for many industrial companies is the number 1 or number 2 metric. Earnings are great, right? The media loves to talk about earnings per share, but free cash flow is what actually can be reinvested in R&D, can be reinvested in infrastructure, can be used to pay shareholders. And then probably most importantly for any executive that's tied to compensation of shareholder value, the market cap growth is off the charts for Pathfinders compared to other companies. So when we look at these Pathfinder companies, what are they doing differently as compared to others? The first is they're not chasing profit. They're not chasing dollar and cents. They're not even chasing productivity. They're chasing a vision and mission for the organization that resonates internally and externally. Most people don't go into manufacturing to get rich, right? We would have gone into investment banking if that was our goal, right? We actually want to build things, create things, deliver value to the world. And so you have to start there in manufacturing. And then at the enterprise level, you have to map it out. You have to then say, okay, here's the financial, here's the customer, here's operations, here's learning and growth. How do they all fit together? And so Pathfinders do this hard work, and they stay laser focused on their vision and mission. Next, they do the hard work. They run the process. They bring their team together and along to understand how to prioritize their strategies. And so these are the 5 strategy dimensions that we have to say, how can you differentiate? What makes our strategy different than another organization's strategy? And so you have to understand this at the enterprise level and then map it through to the operations organization, the operational level. And so we see mistakes here all the time, where the enterprise may be trying to differentiate on innovation or customer intimacy, but the operations organization is doing a low cost, how do I cut costs the most within operations? Because they view operations as a cost center. And so there's a complete disconnect between the value that the enterprise is trying to deliver to the customer and how they want to differentiate against competitors, and how the operations organization thinks that they can deliver value to the enterprise. One other point here, and we do support and believe in the work of market, or the discipline of market leaders, which has been around for 20 plus years. No company can be great at every dimension. You're not going to have the value chain that is the most innovative and the lowest cost and the most responsive and with the highest quality and the most sustainable. If you have that scattershot approach, you'll end up being probably average in all. And so you do have to pick a few and optimize around those. The next gets to communication and building a strategy, and we shared this last year. We talk about it as Operation 2030, the journey to zero plus, but this is why I think a lot of COOs aren't viewed strategically within their organization. They haven't spent the time and intellectual capital to think about things like visualizing the strategy, branding the strategy, an executive communication plan that resonates at the front lines. And so this is our model. You can steal it with pride, you can tailor it, you can build your own, but we really do think you need to brand this, you need to tie it to that enterprise strategy. You have to understand the pillars, how they fit together. You have to understand what is the foundation that supports these pillars and get everybody aligned around this. And then when you're implementing this strategy, what are the ways that across operations we do things differently? And this research showed there was 4 ways, and I'll just treat them at a very high level, we do things differently in manufacturing. The first thing Pathfinders do, and those leaders within operations, is they make things different. So that means they have both unique products as well as unique processes to manufacture those products. So when we do benchmarking, we come to an event like this, people will talk about leadership, people will talk about their ERP system implementation, but will they talk about their unique production process? No, like that's off limits, right? So that's the real IP for a lot of industrial companies. The next, which Niels will be talking about tomorrow, is building radical trust and transparency. And that ties into multiple dimensions. So Allison will be leading some discussion tomorrow on the ideas of servant leadership. And so trust and transparency is the core to that. It's also about how you engage with your trading partners, both upstream and downstream. Do you share information? Do you collaborate? Or do you hoard information and compete within your supply chain? And we find leaders obviously are more open, more transparent. And then the final piece is AI and data. Right? And do you have transparency and quality in your data models, in the way that people trust those models? Are they explainable? Do you understand the bias that may or may not be within those models or not? The next 2 is growth and innovation from anywhere and delivered quality. And so that is really changing the decision-making processes within manufacturing, making sure that the people who have the information and have the perspective and are closest to the problem are the ones solving it. So moving away from command and control. And then from a quality perspective, not just delivering compliance, not just making sure everything's documented, but making sure we're actually delivering a differentiated experience or product in the eyes of the customer. And so the final piece here on how to differentiate and then deliver this to the front lines is about putting the strategy into action. And this is our Future of Industrial Work framework. And we look at 3 elements here. The first is the total employee end-to-end experience. So when we think about this transformation, when we think about this strategy, put it in the context of what does the end-to-end experience of a frontline employee look like 5 years from now, when this strategy is fully deployed, when you've deployed all this new process, new technology, new leadership capabilities, what does that new experience look like for the front lines? How do you support that experience with a servant leadership, right? It's not about what this strategy is going to do for the leaders. It's how the leaders are going to deliver this to the front lines with that better experience for them. And then the third piece is technology and really delivering human-centric technology to enable the front lines and deliver that strategy in action. So, what does this look like in reality? How is this actually deployed? So the number 1 Pathfinder of all 339 companies that we studied was First Solar in the high-tech space. They grew productivity over the last 3 years 52%, which is just an off-the-charts number. And when you look at the CEO, who's actually on the finance side, and Kane was formerly the CFO, and what he has done differently to drive success for this organization, there's a lot of overlap with what we just discussed and what he's doing and they're doing, the team's doing. First, they don't start with dollar and cents. They start with a mission and vision for the organization, and that is leading the world's sustainable energy future. That is their North Star. That's what they're pointed at. And they have 3 specific differentiators that they focus on in their strategy. The first is manufacturing leadership. They're one of the few companies I know that actually has a chief manufacturing officer that reports directly to the CEO. Not surprisingly, they're the only solar company that doesn't manufacture in China. They operate in Ohio and Louisiana and a few other places, but they're doing this here in the US, and they're driving this productivity here in the US. And so they differentiate manufacturing and say, we're going to win there. The other place they win is technology leadership. They believe they have the best solar technology out there. And then the third piece is their idea of responsible solar. And so that's this idea of operationalizing sustainability, embedding it within the operation. They don't want to just deliver products that drive the transition. They want to drive internally waste, water, energy use to zero. And when you look at the CEO and listen to what he says in earnings reports, puts manufacturing, capacity growth, the end-to-end value chain from design to delivery, how that supports sales and marketing, ties that all together. And when you look at their actual financial performance over the last 6 years, 6.5 years, revenue growth is not off the charts. They grew 14% revenue in 6 years. Operating margin growth is ridiculous, 300% growth in margins. Free cash flow was relatively flat. They're pretty much break even on free cash flow. And the market cap growth is, I really wish I knew this 6 years ago and invested, at 785%. So they've created $23 billion in shareholder value in 6 years. So a couple indicators to know if you're on the path to becoming one of the world's most productive companies or not. When you look at your operations organization, do you have a strategy leader? Somebody that actually ties all these pillars together, runs this process, brings it together, delivers the message to the front lines? A lot of companies, the answer might be no. They might view manufacturing and operations as a cost center. They might run a supply chain planning, S&OP, or integrated business planning process, but operations might not even have a seat at that table. Quality and EHS might not have a seat at that table. And they may have a lot of silos, both data-wise and culturally, between the different stages of the value chain. Another gap you might see is not bringing along shareholders and other stakeholders. Right? Is our decision-making operations driven by the market, driven by short-term financial requirements to hit earnings per share or hit dividend percentages or hit margins, or have we built that trust to bring the market along with us on our long-term goals? And do our local communities and trading partners trust us and engage with us or not? And then is technology a core competency within operations? Or is it something left for the other? Do we rely on playbooks and architectures driven by other organizations and standards bodies? Right? When we talk about the power of preposition, is technology something that is happening to us, being done for us, or are we driving that change with us? How do you know you might be on the right path to success? One might be, do you deeply understand competitive value and competitive advantage? Customer value and competitive advantage. Not just at the executive level in a PowerPoint, but when you go down to the shop floor, when you're talking to front-line team supervisors or operators, they actually understand how they deliver value to the customers, what they do better than the competitors, how those KPIs that they're tracking map to those differentiators. Another thing you might be doing is identifying and eliminating organizational debt. Jim Wells will be talking about that later this afternoon. Is there an understanding across the organization that what got us here won't get us there? That as we were building the vision for change, we actually have to do things differently to drive that change across the organization. And then finally, at the executive level, are we investing in strategic communication? Are we driving change management across the organization? Do people, are they scared of productivity growth? Do they think it's an impossible pie-in-the-sky vision, or do they see a true path and they believe in the message to drive that change? And so I hope that gives you a few ideas on how to drive change across your organization. I hope you're able to engage with peers, engage with the analyst team, engage with myself to drive this change across your organization. And I hope next year everyone in this room, right, is on that path to becoming a Pathfinder. So thank you.
Please welcome to the stage AVEVA Chief Commercial Officer Sue Quense and Vice President of Manufacturing Solutions Keith Chambers.
Good morning. I feel like Matt just stole all of my content. But he doesn't have this piece. When I started my career in automation, collaboration and technology took the form of 1.44 megabyte floppy disks and sneakernet and telephones, but they were landlines. And I tell you this to say that technology is changing all the time, and we really need to stay abreast of the technology to make sure that we are able to meet the challenges that we have today. So we just had a couple of weeks ago an event with all of our customers, and we had a meeting with industrial leaders much like this. And we sat down with them and we asked them, what is your challenge? And I don't think, Matt just talked about it. I don't think it's a surprise to any of you. The challenges were, number one, workforce, right? We have labor shortages. We have skills, skills challenges. We have problems retaining and recruiting and engaging our workforce. We also, since the pandemic, have a workforce that is distributed whether we like it or not. So how do we deal with that? So that was number one. Number two, operational excellence. You heard, everything's down. Worker fatalities, are down. Worker safety is down. Worker product quality is down. Productivity is down. All of these things are down. How are we going to address that? Supply chain resiliency, given the fact that everybody's supply chains stretch across the world. And of course, that was all wrapped around a wrapper of sustainability. And so we talked to these leaders and we said, okay, how are we going to manage this? Now, we're here in support of you. That's what AVEVA does. AVEVA enables our customers to achieve their goals. So if we look at what's happening today, the scale and nature of the challenges affecting you are enormous. 40 years ago's technology is not going to help. Last year's technology is not going to help. We've always got to be moving forward and providing technology that will help you achieve your goals. And so I'd like to, how do we do this? How do we take all of this data that's available out there? How do we take all of the tech? I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but there's a lot of options with tech. Do you know which ones to use and how to use them? How do you take all that and use it to the best benefit of your organization? And so I'd like to let Keith share a few thoughts on how that can happen. Keith?
Thank you, Sue. Yes, good morning, everyone. So I'll kind of go a little more deeper into this kind of topic around collaboration, data sharing, how to drive the agility that we need in our businesses today. And I'll start off, talk a little bit about kind of empowering teams. I don't know how you guys felt, but I thought some of the numbers that Matt shared, while not surprising, are kind of shocking, right? So 9 months average time in position. How do you bring people into a job in 9 months and get contribution from them in that period of time? So a lot of challenges, particularly around productivity, which is where we're kind of focusing on. And to start with productivity and how to build or amplify productivity, you have to start with the team. And so this idea of empowering a team, and how do you empower the teams that are in your plants? So within your plants, there's kind of two great cycles or intervals. There's the short interval, the shift the day. There's a long interval, which is a continuous improvement cycle. And you have teams and people who work across those cycles. But how do you empower those teams? And I would suggest that there's maybe 5 things that you need to provide to the team, to the people that are working, to really enable them to become productive and to perform, and to create what I call a culture of performance within your operations team. So those 5, the first is the people need to know what the plan is. So what's the plan? What am I supposed to be doing? What's my goals? What am I achieving? So that might be a schedule, a checklist. It may be a KPI target. But the short interval, the operating the plant, the shift is all about meeting standards. And so it's very important that your team has access to what is today's standard. I have to produce this much of this product. I have to achieve this level of OEE. I have to kind of improve my changeover times by this much. Whatever those kind of goals or standards are, it's important that everyone on the team has access and knows what is the plan. So the second part of that is, how am I doing against the plan? It's one thing to know I'm supposed to produce a 10,000 widget order today. It's another thing to know how many of those widgets I've actually produced, how many am I likely to produce in the time that I have left, and how am I making progress against those plans, those KPIs, whether they be sustainability or cost metrics. How am I doing against them? So that's the second piece of information, of data that you need to bring to your teams to really empower them, is this idea of kind of, okay, here's the plan, here's how I'm doing against the plan. So the third thing that you need to empower that team with is to let them know what do you need to do about it. So, okay, my goal for OEE is 75%, and right now we're at 69%. So why is that? And what should I be doing about it? So there's a lot of kind of lean, and some people use OpEx or world class or Six Sigma. There's various kind of techniques out there, but they all kind of have one thing in common, in that they'll have a way to bring information, what needs to be done. The idea of the classic and on board. The reason I'm not achieving my goals, my plan for today, is because of these 3 things. And so I need to go and fix and address these 3 things. So that's the third thing. The fourth thing that the folks in your team need to know and to understand is how can they get help. So particularly in a time where you have people new to role, don't have experience perhaps, and maybe they've been doing something and now they're seeing something that they don't know how to address, or they've been trying to address something and it hasn't been working. So who can help me do those things that I need to do if I'm not able to perform them by myself? So this is a collaboration thing. How can I reach out to someone? And in this age of kind of remote working and distributed teams, that person may not be on the site. It used to be you could just go ask Joe, who'd been here 50 years, who's just down the line. Maybe you can't do that now. Maybe the Joes are all in a central COE subject matter expert group in some other site somewhere, and so you need to be able to reach out, connect, and get help. So the final kind of piece around empowerment is how can I improve? So for most of us, get satisfaction out of doing our jobs, doing them well, and a part of doing your job, doing it well, is to be able to improve. So where you don't know kind of how to do something, you can reach out, you can get help, but in the process, you also need to be able to learn how to do that job. So next time you know, that learning needs to be recognized, and this is part of the technology that wraps around these teams, is to capture those learnings, acknowledge those learnings. So very common in shift handover meetings, for instance, today, will be a section on accomplishments, where they'll just talk about, hey, operator Mary here actually completed her certification on the A35 filling machine. Great job, Mary, and everyone can applaud. Just those little things of kind of how to improve, learnings and acknowledgement is part of this idea of wrapping around and empowering your team. So that's kind of the first of the 3 points that I want to talk about. The second is the idea of kind of amplifying productivity. So obviously we talked about, Matt talked about productivity. You guys saw the numbers and the decline. Actually, if you go back even further, So for, say, the consumer products industry group, so from World War II till about 2010, they posted Wall Street's longest winning streak of year-over-year increasing return value to shareholders. So 45 years of increasing returns to their shareholders all came to a stop in 2010. That's when productivity started to flatten and drop. There was a lot of reasons for that. The pandemic, obviously, coming along didn't help. I would have to say, seeing as I'm not one, Gen Z coming along didn't help. We had the Great Resignation and quiet quitting and all those other things. So all of these things kind of impacted productivity, the productivity measures that you're seeing, and productivity is, of course, a key to improving the overall result of your business. No matter how much we might kind of aspire to the idea of the autonomous plant, the plant that just runs by itself, there's very few industries and segments where that's really realistic. Really, the shift is around human-centric. How do we empower the team, and how do we drive productivity for the individual who's maybe only been in a job for a few months? And so this is the idea of accelerating the mastery of skills for the workers that are on the plant floor. And there's, again, technology can help us do that. So if you look at some of the tools that are available today, advanced analytics, AI, machine learning, these are all tools that can help supplement or augment the experience and knowledge of the person who's working. So think about a center lining problem, for instance. An operator who's been on a line for 20 years can look at the line, the products that we're going to make, and he knows how to kind of tweak all the settings for optimum production. Someone who's been there 9 months probably doesn't know how to do that. If the veteran operator isn't there to help, he's just going to use the default settings. So exercises like center lining, which were traditionally done kind of by a separate CI team on a long interval, can now be done continuously in real time. We can take AI and we can teach it the operation of a machine or a line. It can kind of predict for us what some outputs are, whatever's critical. And then it can feed back to the operator what is the optimum setting. So I'll give a kind of an example. It's a published success story we have, but I won't use the name of the company, for quality, doing quality, predictive quality. They had a very kind of tricky process. So the process would result, there was 4 critical quality outputs: moisture, density, fats, proteins. So it was a food process. But they couldn't really test any of those things until the product was made, by which point, if it was off, then they would have to rework, scrap, et cetera, et cetera. And so using advanced analytics, AI, they were able to predict those values, not just predict the output for the current operation and materials that they were using, but because this is a data-driven algorithm that was applied, they could look at, so what are the main levers? I'm looking at 70, 80, 100 different pieces of data to make this prediction, but what are the ones that drive the output the most? So what are the 4 or 5 key settings that I need to make for the operators? What are the key values, the ranges that those need to be in for the optimal output? And so that's an example of where an AI tool can support an operator, can augment his experience and say, hey, I know you're new to running this machine, but if you just set these settings, these 5 things, keep them in the green band here, then you will get an optimum output. You will get improved quality, reduced waste, more stability in the process. So that's one way that we can kind of amplify productivity. Industrial assistance is a second big way, right? So we've all seen ChatGPT and kind of played with it. ChatGPT by itself is not something you would want to use on the plant floor. It tends to kind of hallucinate, make things up sometimes. It also doesn't really understand your plant floor, your processes. And so what we do is kind of, they call it a swarm, but there's an AI bot that sits in between the operator and the large language models, and it intercepts what the operator is asking. And if he's asking something about the data from the plant, hey, what were the stoppages on packaging line 3, then that bot will go into the data store that we have and give the answer, maybe generate some graphs or charts or a dashboard, something like that on it. If the operator kind of drills in more and says, hey, yeah, I see we had some gearbox problems. For this type of packaging machine, what are the typical causes of gearbox problems? We can go into the maintenance manuals that are uploaded into the system for that packaging machine and give a summary out of that. Or if you ask something more general, like, hey, just generally, what do you do for gearbox problems? Then we can pass it out to a large language model and bring back the whole power of the internet. So industrial assistance is that second big augmentation that we can do to amplify productivity. The third is the idea of social collaboration, the idea that kind of people can connect and communicate much more naturally, the way we all do, whether you're a Facebook, Instagram, a Snapchat, a TikToker, whatever you may be. There's a certain paradigm or a pace to those kind of interactions. And so this idea of social collaboration is very important in the plant, because the teams are no longer just the folks on the line or the folks in the break room. Now there might be a remote control, a remote command center, a control tower. There might be subject matter expert centers of excellence located outside of the building. And so the leadership might not be in the plant that day. So the idea that you can kind of seamlessly chat, talk, share information socially in the way that kind of our new employees are used to doing it is very important. And so these kind of three things really amplify productivity on the plant floor. They kind of improve an operator's ability to sense what's happening, an anomaly, a bad quality trend, and they improve the operator's ability to respond. So if they don't know what to do, they can ask for help. They can kind of chat with people from other shifts, other teams, to get some input on what to do. So that's that second pillar, amplifying productivity. The third pillar around this is data, and of course we all talk about data, and we've all got tons of data, as Sue said. Used to all fit on a 5¼ inch floppy disk. I don't know about you guys, but when I was a much younger person, we actually used to cut the slot out on the other side of the disk and flip it over and use it double-sided. So we were able to double our storage by doing that. But today, data is much more than just kind of a repository of things or a report or a way to reflect and look back. It's really much more about, it's almost a new value stream through your value chain. And so data is not just valuable within the plant. I talked about how it's used within the plant, but it's very useful between companies, between partners, between your supplier and you, between the utilities that you work with in your plants, and between you and your customers. And so value chains are changing from this idea of kind of a linear kind of source, make, ship, sales, marketing, that's classic value chain, into really an ecosystem, a network. And that's where the value of data really starts to explode and bring new data, a new value to a business. And that's what helps to drive and accelerate business growth, which is the third point. And to give you an example of that, a very common AI application is predictive maintenance, right? So you run a predictive algorithm, it tells you when your machine's going to break down. That algorithm will only be as good as the data set that you're running it on. So maybe you've got two or three of these types of machines that you run, and you have some 5 years worth of history or something on those machines, and you'll get some kind of prediction from it. But the problem with predictive systems like these kinds of systems, which are data-driven, is they're not very good at predicting things that they've never seen. And unless you've got a 20 or 30-year history of running that piece of equipment in your plant, chances are you won't have seen everything. And so this idea of data sharing, being able to create an ecosystem with, say, the supplier of that equipment, and to be able to train your models across not just your equipment's history, but the history of that particular equipment model across all of the installed base of that particular piece of equipment securely and anonymously is a very powerful concept. So with that, I'll hand back to Sue to wrap up on those 3 points. Thank you
Thanks,
very
Steve.
much.
Okay, so we talked about the fact, Matt said it, right? The workforce of 2019 is gone. Today we have the workforce of 2024 and going forward. How do we help them be as effective as possible? Keith brought up a number of ways we can do that. When we empower our teams by making sure that they understand what it is we need them to do and giving them visibility into measuring how they can do it, we help the company achieve more. When we use data and technology, we are able to amplify the productivity of our workers. This is not about replacing them. I think everybody would agree that that was a kind of a buzzword a few years ago, that we're going to have plants that don't have any people in them. And the fact of the matter is we need the people in the plants. We need their innovation. We need their ability to collaborate with each other and across their ecosystem. And so this is all about selecting how you leverage technology wisely so that you solve problems that have been well defined within your organization, and that technology and data supports the people that are really the heart of what you do. And if you do that, we'll see accelerated business success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Senior Vice President, Americas Supply at AstraZeneca, Andrew Wirths.
Okay. Hey, good morning, everyone, and thank you for that wonderful intro music. But let me also just thank Matt and the LNS team for having me here today, just to share a couple thoughts and maybe build upon some of the work that he shared earlier, and really around employee engagement. That's what I'd like to do today, is really give you a sense of who AstraZeneca is and how we're engaging the workforce in a different way, so we can try to achieve our objectives, right? Sustainability, productivity, those are two, but you can also think of safety, quality, environment, there's a number of dimensions you can measure on your business, but really engaging the workforce is absolutely key, and doing that in a different way. So with that, what I'd like to do is just share who we are. So I see a couple other pharma companies in here, but AstraZeneca is a UK company, so we're not as well known in the US. But we are a top 10 pharma company. So what we do is we discover new medicine. So we discover the medicine, develop it, manufacture it, sell it, distribute it globally. So we're very much an innovative company, and we value the science. Now, we have a really broad range of products that we make, some to rare disease, where you only have maybe a couple hundred patients globally, to products like Farxiga, Crestor, where you have millions and millions of patients, right? So we have a big spectrum there, and across a broad therapeutic class. We also have a very diversified portfolio geographically as well. But I think one thing that's getting a lot more airtime is our commitment to sustainability and our commitment to our people and the planet. And so I'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow when we do our sustainability session. But that's really just a quick snapshot of who AstraZeneca is. And then within global operations, my job is to manufacture medicine. So I have responsibility for the Americas supply region, which is 8 sites in North America, South America. But this is really the entire global operations team. So AstraZeneca has about 90,000 people, 14,000 of those are here in global operations. We're in 25 different plants located in 15 different countries. We source to just about every country in the world. So we keep very busy on this. But you can see just the spectrum, a lot of tablets, 28 billion tablets we make a year. So a lot of volume. I think you get the picture on this in terms of the complexities that we have. And I think the last piece around the employees and the nationalities represented by our employees, 117 different countries. So Ellen McMahon, who's here with me today, we're going to talk a little bit more about our diversity, our inclusion, and our engagement strategy for the workshop. So you'll get a better sense of that. So that's global operations. But I want to build on some of the things Matt was talking about, and that is, here are some of the macro themes we're seeing from a changing world. And I just bolded a few things that I'm going to tease out through the discussion. The first is around science and technology, and I think you saw it in the last discussion, just how, you heard reference to floppy disks, right? So you can kind of get a sense for how much the world has changed, and really what some of the new science is teaching us, and some of the advances in technology and what that's providing us. So we now have new ways to treat unmet medical needs, new modalities. That immediately comes back to us in terms of, okay, how do we make those new modalities? So that's one big change that we're seeing. The other big one is just global societal changes. And what you're seeing much more is really a cost pressure on us. Quite simply, nations and providers just can't afford our medicine. And that's a global theme. You see it here in the US with the Inflation Reduction Act, finally capping some of the pharma prices. The other global societal shift is around sustainability, and there's a greater demand for decarbonizing your supply chains, as well as health equity. So for ourselves being in the healthcare business, health equity is a big piece, making sure that we have equal access. Patients, of course, their expectations are changing, and again, themed around sustainability. And then I think the last piece, which I think is really evident, is just, digital data and what that means. And so with the evolution of all of these different technology platforms, it's driving a completely different need in our workforce, and one that really drives on lifelong learning, which we'll hit upon. So that's really four big themes. I think it ties in well with what Matt shared. The external workplace is changing, as well as the workforce. And I think we're in a constant state of transformation. I think that's probably the new theme, is everyone's always transforming to keep up. But we're seeing demographic shifts as well. We're seeing a retirement cliff where some of the older workforce is moving out, and we just don't have the workforce to backfill. Digitization and analytics is, of course, providing a major shift for us, which underscores our need for learning agility. So when we hire new people, we have to be very, very cautious about, can they learn, can they grow, can they develop? The human-centric leadership, and we'll talk much more about this in our breakout session that we have, is really around the expectation of employees is also rapidly changing. Not just flexibility, but being able to grow, develop, a different expectation in the worker-employer relationship. And then a volatile labor market. I think we really saw that after COVID, but within operations, we have shop floor personnel who are typically hourly. We then have a salaried staff, scientific staff, and we've seen really dynamic changes in that market as well. And so there's an awful lot going on here. And so the areas of focus, and this ties in well with Matt's theme around the frontline workforce and preparing that frontline workforce for the future, is really around the shifting expectations of the shop floor operator, the material handler, the quality analyst. And it's about having a workforce that's much more autonomous, much more capable, much more independent. And the expectation is that we would need them to really manage themselves and come up with new creative ideas. It's not enough to do your job. You have to do your job and make it better. And so I think there's a different expectation on our shop floor workforce than we've had in previous years. The human-centric leadership, think about the first line leader, the second line leader. How do they engage that workforce differently so that they're always growing and developing and able to do their best work? So that's really a focus of ours, an area of focus. And then the last piece is really that entire employee experience. So how do we bring somebody in and let them grow through their career? How do they grow and develop? And what's the pathway for their employee experience? How do they grow in their career? One of the things I'm pretty proud of at my sites is when we have new operators come in and they give feedback on what's their first 90 days like. What I like hearing is, hey, at AstraZeneca, I have a career here. I'm a formulator, I'm a material handler, but I feel like I have a career. And that's because we don't treat the employees differently, whether they're hourly or salary. We try to treat everybody as salaried employees and invest in them. And so I think that's something around everyone having a career pathway is really important. And that really helps us drive the sustainability and productivity that I'll get to. So what are we doing? So those are the areas we're focusing on. But what are we actually doing? So the first is we're leading with our purpose, our values, our behaviors. And I think for us, being in the healthcare sector, we have a real advantage because I can draw a straight line from the work I'm doing today to a patient. And it's always fantastic to get patient stories. We have someone come back and say, you know what, I had my lifestyle like this before I took your medicine and now I can do all these things again. So that's really, and we need to share that with our people. So we're doing that much, much better. For a long time, I felt like we under-leveraged that. It's right in front of us, and we're not sharing that with our workforce. But people are just inspired. They have a sense of purpose. They come in, and they're just far more committed because they know the work they're doing is going to make a difference. So we're really trying to leverage that a bit. I think the coaching piece, the second one, we changed our performance management model from, hey, at the end of the year, I'll give you your rating, and here's your bonus, okay? You exceeded expectations, you're below expectations, right? And we went from that model a few years ago to now, I'm going to meet with you quarterly, and we're going to talk about how you develop. And so what went well, what didn't go well in the last quarter, what did you learn from it, and how will you get better going forward? That discussion, that whole dynamic, so we don't have ratings anymore. But what it really means is that frontline leader now has to be a coach, has to be a teacher, really has to be someone that supports the employee. Inclusion and diversity. We call it inclusion and diversity, not D&I. Most places call it diversity and inclusion. We put the emphasis on inclusion. And inclusion is something we have complete control over. It's how we behave. It's how we engage workforce. It's how we allow people to participate. So we're really focusing on that inclusion. We need every person to come in every day and do their best work. And so everybody's included in that. So we put a lot more focus on the inclusion piece, as well as the diversity piece. But the inclusion piece is something you can do instantly. Right? It's really about leader behavior. So we're focusing on that. And then lastly, I mentioned it, with just all the change, we need people that can always learn, always reinvent themselves, always come up with new skills, et cetera, and so that they can always fully contribute. So those are the things that we're doing. We're really promoting that lifelong learning. So I'll get into some of the actions we're taking, excuse me, around sustainability and productivity. And I think the first thing we've done is we created an AstraZeneca supply system. And we did this about 7 years ago. We really formalized it. And I'm not going to go through the supply system house, but I think most manufacturers have something like this. If you think of Toyota production system and you read all the lean books, right, it's really around Toyota production system. Procter & Gamble has IWS. Well, we have our AstraZeneca supply system. And so when you think of lean, OpEx, you can use a lot of different terminologies, but it's really about how do you add value to the customer? Who is the customer? How are you adding value? How are you eliminating waste, right? And so what we're doing is every employee gets certified on this, so they understand it, but they also understand the tools. So all of the practical problem solving, the Six Sigma, et cetera, all of those kind of tools are embedded in there. But what this does is it provides really a consistent approach of how we're running all these sites across the world, right? So we now have a consistent operating doctrine. Here's how we're going to run our operations. And what it does is every employee is engaged. Every employee is expected to participate and to contribute. And then last is we have a common definition and language that we have. So that allows us to really standardize much, much better. So I put in parentheses, no idea too small. And there's one site that I'll just share with you that has a program. Well, I won't call it a program. It's fairly informal, but it's a contest. And there's a trophy that gets handed out or passed around from department to department. But who had the best idea this week? And who implemented the best idea? And the ideas could be simple. They could be small. But it could be an operator has his toolbox here, but the equipment's over there. let's put a storage space next to the equipment, right? So you eliminate the walking back and forth. It's a simple idea, but the only rule is you have to have implemented it and you had to have shared it. And so we pass this trophy around. It makes its way around the site, but it's generated thousands of different ideas, big, small. But what happens is over time, you get better and better. And so that's kind of the engagement that we're talking about. So I'll give some specifics now. And I want you to think about, this is at my level, at the regional level, but then you have to think about what happens at the site and the department level. So envision some of the KPIs I want to share as being cascaded. And the first I'll share is really around my carbon footprint as a regional lead. And what you see here, and this is real numbers, and I just pulled this off, so these aren't recreated slides, but this is what we shared at our business review meetings, which is what's my glide path? Am I on my glide path? How am I going to get to a scope 1 and 2 carbon zero impact? And what are the ways I'm going to do this? Now, what you don't see here is because we don't do volume offsets, but my volume has doubled over the last 5 years. But you see my energy is about flat, and that's because of the employees who are engaged. We're finding creative ways to how do you reduce your energy consumption. So not only do we keep our energy flat, but we're now driving out the carbon footprint here. This next one, again, it's really just a screenshot of my scorecard, so nothing particularly fancy here, but you can see all my sites, and you can start to see my waste, my water, my circularity, my energy consumption, and my global greenhouse. And so I'm on a glide path where every year I have to hit certain targets. And you can see some sites are hitting their target, some sites are not. So what you can envision now is every site having this at their top level, at their site leadership team, but then it drills down into the department and into the shop floor. And where we've seen a lot of engagement is around the circularity. So you have operators coming out and saying, wait a second, I'm seeing a lot of waste here. Can I reuse these pallets? Can I reuse these fiber drums? Can I reuse these things and increase our circularity? So really getting everyone engaged around how we're measuring. You know what, this valve has been left on. I'm going to turn that off. It helps me with my water consumption. You know what, the CIP cycle is going for for too long. Can we shorten it? So you get all these creative ideas across thousands of people, starts to drive these numbers down. Another quick example just around productivity, same thing. You know, your trend should go in a couple directions. Your unit cost should go down, your throughput per FTE should go up, right? And that's what you see here. And what we do is we try to create a multi-year view. And you can see I have a couple issues. I have, in one area, I have my costs are going to go up in 2 years. So what am I going to do today to help reshape that curve? And that's where we start engaging everybody. So we actually have the problem statement. But this is some of the productivity that we were trying to drive through here. And I could have picked any other KPI. I could have picked safety. I could have picked some of my other environmental targets. I could have picked quality targets, et cetera, et cetera. But I wanted to focus on these two. Okay, and then the last one I'll share is just the pulse survey. We call it a pulse survey. You're taking a pulse of the organization. But every year we have one of these. We used to do it every 2 years, where you go out and you ask about a series of about 25 questions. And this is just one sample sheet. And what we're doing is, well, we have employee engagement as a theme throughout. It should be happening 24/7. At least once a year, we go out and we have a formal survey. And we get about 95%. It's voluntary, but we get 95% participation. So you get a good sense of how people are feeling and what they're doing. And this is just a sample snapshot of this, but I'll point on one, which is our sustainability goals. And I'm at 88%. And you can see it went up 1 point from the last time we took this survey. And it's about, do I understand how I contribute to our sustainability targets? And so 88% are favorable. What also means 12% are not. Okay, so we have a little bit more work to do here. Maybe our new employee orientation should be upgraded or enhanced to make sure that people can see that connectivity. And so that's an example. So we'll take the survey results, we'll do the focus groups, we'll make sure we put actions in place, and we'll share that. And so that's just an example of how we're trying to really harness the power of the workforce. 14,000 people. You know, we need every person every day doing their best work and moving the business forward. Okay, and so lastly, I'll leave you with a question, and for folks who are going to be joining us at the roundtable, is what else can you do to better engage your workforce? And I think that's a fundamental question that really is an underpinning to our success and to our future. So with that, folks, thank you very much. Really good to see everyone.
All right, can we give all of our keynotes a huge round of applause, guys? We are running a few minutes late, but when the content is so engaging, we didn't want to stop anyone. So 2 requests. We've gone digital. There are no paper surveys, but all of our surveys are on our app. So if you've not done it, it is an amazing app. It's a really easy app. We have a QR code everywhere around. Just point your camera there, and you'll find this app. You'll have agenda there. You'll have your sessions. A lot of you registered probably a few weeks, few months back. You might not know which roundtables you're part of. This will actually give you your roundtables. It'll give you what dinner you're in, and then also tomorrow's agenda. So I would please request everybody to download the app. And also, please provide us feedback. We take all of the feedback seriously. The content, the format, all of these really help. So we're running a little bit late, so we're going to take 15 minutes. There'll be coffee outside. You'll have your roundtable sessions. Most of the sessions are right here on second floor. There's one session on floor number 3. Please let us know if you have any challenges finding your sessions. I hope you have an amazing rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing all of you in the next sessions.
Join us here again today at 4 p.m. for our executive keynote panel. Enjoy your roundtable sessions.